Good morning, church. So glad you guys are here, joining us in the room, as well as our church family for Cornerstone and Home Online. We're so thankful for you all as well. And to get us started today, I want to talk about car alignment, because this seems like a really good time and place to talk about cars. I used to have this old Grand Cherokee, like a mid-90s Grand Cherokee. It was one of the first cars I owned. And it just had a bad habit, or bad pattern, I guess, of getting out of a line, and it was always the worst when I had to drive on a long trip. So anybody had to drive with their car out of a line, and what does it do? You're constantly having to fight it to keep it going straight, right? Because if you let your hand go, not that you should be obviously letting go of the wheel when you're driving, but if you were to let it go, what would happen? It would begin to pull you in a specific direction, not continue straight. And it's really more of a nuisance when it comes to a car, but if you were to let it continue on unchecked without getting it realigned, it would eventually begin to eat away the tires. And so some of you guys, I can just remember my dad, and older cars were worse about this, be like, oh, we got to get the car, the tires aligned because it's going to ruin a good set of tires. Tires are expensive, it's going to ruin a good set of tires. And it really will. It will ruin a good set of tires. Well, the reason I talk about car alignment is that actually that has a lot of application to our life on a practical side, of where there are often patterns and habits that you and I possess that, while they may not seem like that big of a deal, over the long term, they will not take us to where we want to go, and we will continually have to fight to get our life back on track. Anybody understand what I'm talking about so far? Whereas this thing that keeps pulling us away, pulling us to itself or off course, and honestly, over time, it will do a lot more damage than you suppose. So driving 1 mile with a car out of a line, no big deal. Driving 5,000 miles with your car out of a line, and it's a really big deal, aside from just being a nuisance. Well, today's adjustment, and we've actually been talking about adjustments all in this series, and in the series called Bidding Wars, we're talking about things that are bidding for our time, our attention, our heart. And we talked about how things are bidding for our allegiance on week 1, and how last week we talked about there are things bidding for your joy, that joy and happiness are very different. And there's a lot bidding on your joy, because joy is important and valuable, and the more valuable something is, the more bidding that takes place. Well, today's bidding war takes over on this, or goes along with this theme here. There is a lot in this life that is bidding for your rest. There's a whole lot in our culture, in your personal life, in your professional life, that is bidding for your rest. And I hope today serves as a realignment, in a sense, that this is a shop moment where you take your car in, and right now we're in the shop emotionally and spiritually today. And so I hope to bring up a lot of things that point to this fact that we as a culture, and I would say that almost all of us, if not all of us, as individuals, need a realignment when it comes to the value, the importance, and the biblical perspective of what rest means. See, there's a bidding war for your time. And the reason there's a bidding war for your time is because time is one of the most valuable things you can possess. Think about this. Almost everything in your life, if you spend it, you can do something to earn it back, correct? If you spend money, what do? You go and you trade time to get the money back. Make a decision with your money. Well, over time, you can probably earn it back. But, much to our dismay, we cannot go back and redeem our time. Wouldn't that be nice, right? Who in here would go back to their late teens and early 20s and recorrect some wrongs? Like, I would not have dated that person. I would not have bought that car. I wouldn't have went to that school. I wouldn't have majored in that thing. I wouldn't have made this financial choice. I wouldn't have made this personal choice if I could only go back. But here's the thing. Once time is gone, it's gone. Like, forever. Like, it's never coming back. Like, I'm having a little bit of a moment, because this is about to blow your mind. Some of y'all, I probably shouldn't even tell you this. I'm about to turn 35 next month. And here's the weird thing about time, because some of y'all are like, oh, he's just a baby. So what? So I have this wonderful baby face. And some of y'all are like, he's ancient, because when I was in my 20s, I thought you died after your 30s. I didn't think you could make it. I didn't know. Anyway, I'm being extreme. But here's the funny thing about time, though, is when you're young, you think you have too much of it. And as the older you get, you realize how fast it really goes. And then the enemy also knows that too. And the enemy's greatest ploy, one of his greatest ploys, is that if he can keep you busy on things that waste your time, you will eventually live a wasted life. Y'all follow that? That if the enemy can get you to waste your time, if you waste enough of it, you will have a wasted life. And what does a wasted life look like? Well, ultimately not fulfilling the dreams and purposes and desires that God has placed in your heart to do. That's a wasted life. And so many people, so many of us, wish that we could go back and redeem the time that we can't. And so why am I talking about rest? Well, because rest, and this seems counterintuitive, rest, biblical rest, as we're going to find, is one of the most valuable things you can do with your time. That we live in a culture that honestly doesn't understand what rest looks like doing. Especially in this pandemic, the reason I'm speaking about this personally is a lot of times what I preach is kind of the outflow of what's happening in my personal life. Is I have found myself in this season, certainly the pandemic has made it worse, where I find it very difficult to stop. Like there's always something to do, isn't it? There's always something to do. There's always more work to be done. There's always projects to get done. There's always something going on with the kids. And sometimes, guys, just from my perspective, I will be honest, so you can be honest, I can seem so out of sorts and so miserable, but I don't know how to stop this roller coaster I seem to find myself on. Like, have you ever been there? You ever been on a roller coaster ride and you're like, this was a terrible decision? I feel like my life is like that a lot of times, and I have a suspicion that you do too. Because we don't know what biblical godly rest looks like. So what are some things that bid for our rest and bid for our time? Well, one, technology. And we talk about this a lot, and it isn't because I'm a technology hater. I love technology sometimes too much. That's why I use it, because I think we all love technology too much. It's the first thing we see in the morning. It's the last thing we see at night. It's what we're tuning our minds into all day. We're connected. We're tuned in. How often in your life do you have more than 10 minutes of silence? Some of you are like, what is this silence you speak of? I've never heard of such. I didn't know that could happen. No, I would not only say it should, not only does it happen, that it should happen. So technology can rob us of so much time. This is one of my bad habits. I can get onto YouTube and I love to just look up random facts or how to do something when I'm starting a project. And you start, I'm just going to watch one video, right? Oh, okay, I'm just going to watch this next video. And these algorithms are so good that they know how to suggest exactly what you want to watch. And then what happens? 2 hours later, what have I been doing for 2 hours? Wasting time. So technology can rob us of our time and our rest. And listen, that is not rest. Being turned on like that all the time, tuned into technology, that is not rest. Another thing that bids for our time is stress and work. Isn't it great that now, because your company gives you a cell phone, they can reach you whenever and wherever you want, huh? Isn't that a wonderful thing? Anybody in here glad for that shift in the American workplace? No, thank you. But we still do it. We're still turned on all the time. We're still plugged in all the time. We're still on go all the time. So when it comes to technology, when it comes to work, we're never resting. Your relationships can actually be bidding for your rest, because even though relationships are powerful, if you're not careful, you will allow people into your life who don't understand the phrase personal time and space, and they will suck your energy dry, and so that you're never able to shut it down, shut it off, right? Some of y'all got some leeches in your life, and I'm not saying you shouldn't help people, but I am saying that boundaries are important. Like, we all got that friend who's like, why are you texting me past 7:30? Don't normal people go to bed like at 8 o'clock or something? I mean, doesn't everybody else know not to text at 9? Are you crazy? But some people don't know boundaries, and it's very important that you create boundaries. Parents, it's important for you to create boundaries with your kids, because as much as we love them, give our lives for them, but if you don't set boundaries, they will never leave you alone. Did you know that? Kids can actually be emotional leeches. We love them, but we got to set boundaries. See what happens If you don't rest, this is important. If you don't rest, you will crash. If you don't rest, you will crash. So what does crashing look like? Well, crashing can look like depression. Crashing looks like withdrawing from the very things that you have been working so hard to do. I think we've all experienced some form of crash somewhere along the line. Crashing happens when you get so tired, so fed up, so sick, so overdone, so overworked. The very thing that you've been doing and expending so much energy on for the past several months, years, whatever, you will then trade all of that work in because you had enough, right? And we've seen people do this. We've done it ourselves. But think about that logically. It is better to put in the space to rest than to go hard and then be good for nothing. Rest is important. So we're going to look at a Bible story that actually illustrates this power of rest and how this isn't just my idea. It's not just a human idea. This is an idea from God. This is actually how God created us to function. And so this Bible story starts in the Old Testament. And last week we actually talked about Abraham and Isaac, the start place of the Israelite people, the promised people of God, through whom he was going to bless the whole world. And so through a series of events over several generations, they found themselves in Egypt. And at first it was a great thing. And it was actually a very life-saving thing for both them and the people of God and the Egyptians. But over time and over several generations, wicked pharaohs and wicked rulers came up and saw the children of Israel as people who could be exploited. And so they eventually found themselves enslaved to the Egyptian empire for over 400 years. 400 years. Just FYI, that's longer than America's been in existence. And so sometimes I know it can seem really frustrating that God's not happening in a hurry, but sometimes God does things to his own time and in his own time frame. But they were in slavery for 400 years. And you know what you don't get when you're a slave? Any rest. You don't get rest. And so eventually God hears the cries of his people and he sends in Moses. And through Moses and Aaron, his chosen leaders, he eventually pulls the children of Israel out of Egypt through the 12 plagues. We've all probably heard those stories in the Old Testament. And so then they leave Egypt in this mighty triumphant thing. And then they walk through the Red Sea on dry ground. Like it is one of the most impressive visual miracles, I think, recorded in the Old Testament. They walk through the sea on dry ground over into the promised land. And finally, they are free people. And they sing a song and it's great. But what's so funny is that, of course, people are also people. And we as people have not changed. And so as soon as they get into the promised land, the very first thing they begin to do is complain. So this is where we pick up our story right here. Exodus 16, verse 2. The entire Israelite community grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. The Israelites said to them, "If only we would have died by the Lord's hand in the land of Egypt, when we sat by pots of meat and ate all the bread we want." Isn't it funny how quickly we can become complaining and uncomfortable? Like, they just walk through a stinking ocean on dry land to the other side, and they get there, and they're a little hungry, and they're like, "Oh, we had it so much better in Egypt, even though we were slaves, and they were working us literally to death. At least we had food to eat." But that's just kind of how we are, isn't it? Isn't it funny how God can do something the next day, you're like, "Wasn't enough, God. Wasn't enough." Heart thing. We all have a heart thing. "Instead, you brought us into the wilderness to make this whole assembly die of hunger." Verse 4, "Then the Lord said to Moses, I'm going to rain bread from the heaven for you." Boy, God really going all out for these folks. Going to rain bread down from heaven. Anybody want to take a gander at what the bread was called? Type it in on the comments. What is it called? It was called manna. What is it? Literally, what is it? Manna. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. So only one day's portion at a time. This way I will test them to see whether or not they will follow my instruction. On the sixth day, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather in the other days. Let's keep reading 21. They gathered it every morning. Each gathered as much as he needed to eat, but when the sun grew hot, it melted. On the sixth day, they gathered twice as much food, 4 quarts apiece, and all the leaders of the community came and reported this to Moses. This is the key verse right here. So at this point, what's happening? We don't know. But God was about to introduce something brand new. This was brand new. Verse 23. He told them, "This is what the Lord has said. Tomorrow is a day of complete rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord." And right on cue, the rain comes, because that's how it works on this metal roof. So here's the deal. After rescuing them from Egypt, bringing them through the Red Sea, bringing them out into this new land, they're on the way to the promised land. What did God not do? He did not give them a whole list of rules. He didn't give them a bunch of thou shalt and thou shalt nots. He didn't sit down and give them a talking to and explain how things were going to happen. This is so tremendous that we so easily missed, is He institutes a day of rest. For 400 years, they didn't know what that word meant. And the first act after rescuing them, God does. He says, listen, from now on, after 6 days, you will sit, you will rest from your labor. See, this is so big. And we just blow past this because, see, in our culture, we've heard these sermons. But here's the thing. The reason I bring this up is that we are more like the Israelites now than the New Testament people were. See, when Jesus came on the scene, the Sabbath had become this religious institution. Like, if you didn't rest, you would be punished. Like, it was this whole thing. They had completely missed sight of what the Sabbath was supposed to be. But in the beginning, there was a group of people coming out of slavery that didn't even know what rest meant. And here is what slavery does. That should sting a little in our culture, in our context, because we understand the horrors of slavery. What does slavery do? It dehumanizes, it devalues, it takes away, it makes you less than, it crushes those that are under its foot. And so for 400 years, these people had lived in that reality. And when God brought them out, He didn't say, now you've got a new master and you're going to get about my business. He says, no, I am your Father and I will give you rest. And so verse 30, this is so beautiful. Verse 30, for the first time in 400 years, so the people rested on the 7th day. This verse, this is the birth of the 7th day Sabbath that we have no clue what it really means today. But this is where it started. That God saw fit not to give the 10 Commandments first. Because see, I think that's what we would think, that immediately He marched them out and said, all right, here's my rules and regulations. No. God was like, I see how weary your souls are, and I want to give you rest. Because here's the correlation I want to draw, and this may bristle you a little bit, but this is absolutely true from a biblical perspective. Busyness will make you its slave. Being busy will devalue you, dehumanize you, lessen your ability, crush you under its foot. See, God was trying to show something very powerful to His people and now even to us. That there are a lot of would-be, wannabe masters out there that will tell you, come and follow me and I will give you everything you want. Come and work for me. And if you work hard enough, you can have everything you've ever desired. Just give me your time, trade it over to me and I will give you the wishes of your heart. And it's a lie. That is a form of mental and spiritual slavery that a lot of us are locked underneath in this American culture. Why? Because we do not value sitting around, do we? We are very against that in our culture. We hate the thought of being lazy and the thought of lazy people, don't we? No. It is by your hand and what you achieve that measures who you are as a man or a woman. We're career-oriented. We're goal-focused, task-oriented people. We don't know what it's like to take a break, do we? Because even on our days off, what do we love to do? Get busy. But your time is precious. And God is saying, listen, you need to understand that all of those other things, they will enslave you and crush you. But only I, only me, your Creator, who on 6 days created, on the seventh day rested, giving a pattern, a cycle of rest and refreshment that all of us need to follow. See, without rest, that thing that you feel like you cannot do is controlling you. That thing you feel like you have to do, that you must get done, is actually controlling you. So, biblical rest has two main functions. I want to go over two main things real fast and then we'll be done. Biblical rest has two main functions. The first function of biblical rest is that it causes us to recalibrate. So an example of recalibrate is at home I have this, this printer. We all have these printers at home, right? And maybe you use it a lot, maybe you don't. But whenever you put a new ink cartridge in, what does it ask you to do? You need to recalibrate the print cartridge. Now, you don't have to do that sometimes. Sometimes the old ones didn't force you to do that. But what happened if you didn't go through that recalibration process? It would print smudges and ink everywhere, and it looked like a total disaster. You wouldn't hand that to somebody. It looked like a wreck. But if you calibrated it so that it worked properly as it was intended to, then it would print the most beautiful picture that you could imagine, or at least download from Google. See, rest helps recalibrate our mind and soul. It helps us refocus, reprioritize, reorient our life, our thoughts, our prayers, our emotions into what's actually important. You know why I know we all have a problem with rest? I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand, but we're all in the same boat. How many of us struggle to sit down in the quiet and pray for more than 10 minutes? I'll raise my hand. Because I can't stop thinking about all the stuff I'm supposed to be doing. If I get up in the morning early, you know what my mind goes to? What do I got to do today? When I go to bed at night, what am I thinking? What do I got to do tomorrow? What have I not done today? What did I not accomplish? And then you know what? My Sabbath day comes rolling around. And you know what that day can become? My let me catch up on all the stuff I didn't get finished day. What day is it not? A day of rest. But we're so tuned to be on all the time. And it's all of our problem. That it's so hard to focus. Like, guys, I talk to people who are broken, and I feel it too. That I try to pray. But praying is so hard. Do you know why praying is hard? Because you're retuning your mind to only focus on one thing. That's why it's hard. That's why it's hard to focus in on prayer. I hope y'all can hear me, because it is like monsooning outside. I should be preaching on Noah and the ark. I had to turn me up back there, Donald. Blow everybody out. See, this is what recalibration looks like. I'm going to read from Matthew chapter 6, up on the screen here. Therefore, I tell you, don't worry about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Isn't life more than food and body more than clothing? Is it? Is that where most of your life is focused, is attaining these things? It says, consider the birds of the sky. They don't sow or reap or gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Aren't you more worth it than they? Can any of you add a moment to his lifespan by worrying? So don't worry, saying, what will we eat, or what will we drink, or what will we wear? For the Gentiles eagerly seek, basically the ungodly, eagerly seek all these things. But for you, your heavenly Father knows that you need them. But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be provided for you. See, rest helps us recognize. Rest helps us recognize and recalibrate the parts of our life that are not aligned with God. Rest are those moments when you sit back and ask the hard questions. I think sometimes the reason we don't rest well is because we're scared of what may come after the rest. See, I think in busyness, we can become so addicted to not having to deal with hard things because busyness can kind of give you a false sense of accomplishment, doesn't it? Like, don't you feel good after a busy day sometimes? Man, I've accomplished a lot, but did you accomplish the things that you needed to? Did you accomplish the things that God had called you to? Did you have those conversations that God is asking you to have? Are you making those lifestyle choices and decisions and changes that God is asking you to make? See, rest recalibrates us. It recalibrates the way we think about work and family. It recalibrates the way we think about each other and ourselves. It recalibrates the way we think about our calling and our future. Rest is important because you need to take weekly, not monthly, not annually, but weekly time to sit back and let God speak to you. Let God be the God of your life, not your busyness. Listen, we need to be busy. We need to be working and doing things. Like, God has called us and made us for work, but it's never at the expense of relationship with Him. So first, rest helps us recalibrate. Second, rest gives us an opportunity to relinquish. Why did you use the word relinquish, Pastor Dustin? Well, because it started with an R, like recalibrate. And I hoped that some of y'all would appreciate that. But rest gives us the opportunity to relinquish. Relinquish means to give up, to give over. Like at the beginning or around Christmas time and our kid's birthday, this is just something we do. Maybe y'all think we're cruel parents, but we just don't have the space to store a bunch of toys my kids don't play with. And you know what? Most of our kids in today's generation are so overblessed. They have more things to play with than we ever had. And so we go through a relinquish season where they have to go and pick out all of the old toys they don't play with. Now, if you ask my kids' opinion on this, they would think that I'm asking them to cut off their arm. What do you mean, give up this thing I haven't touched in 3 months? This just so happens to be my favorite toy all of a sudden. No, it's not. You forgot about it until I just told you to move it. You haven't touched it. That's kind of what we do with parts of our life. But see, with my kids, I'm trying to get them to understand, well, listen, Christmas is coming, birthday is coming. We're making space for things that you actually want, not for things you think you want. This toy is for a baby, somebody younger than you. It's no longer applicable to your life. You need to make space for the good things that are coming. That's really what God is asking us to do when we rest, is relinquish that feeling of control and pride and self-fulfillment that we think we need to make our life worth something. Because see, the problem with busyness is that business is actually our attempt to do God's job in our life. Did you know that? That if you're trying to earn and do by your own power, you are saying, step aside, God, I got this one. You know the problem with that is? Most of our problems are all because of us. Isn't that true? Who has made the worst decisions for your life thus far? Probably you have. I have. For me, I have made some terrible decisions. And you know where those terrible decisions never came off the heels of? They never came off the heels of me taking rest and seeking God. They never came on the heels of me practicing a Sabbath time to focus my mind and my heart to the will and direction of God. It's always come off the heels of me being so busy that I am truly flying by the seat of my pants in my life. And that's a terrible way to live. And so God is offering you to relinquish in rest, to relinquish this sense of control, because you honestly don't have control. Look at the birds and look at the flowers and how well God takes care of those. How much more will He take care of you? One of the most valuable things in the universe, so valuable that the Son of God died for you, for your soul. That's how precious you are. Imagine how well He wants to take care of you, but you have to first relinquish things. You have to relinquish an agenda. You have to give up some of your time, that thing that's oh so valuable. But let's think about this practically, and maybe this is some tips on some toes, because this challenges me. It's funny how I never seem to have the time to spend with God that I want, but I can still waste half a day watching reruns on television. It's mind-blowing. I've seen that episode before. It's nothing new, but crazy how our own hearts don't want to do the relinquishing work of rest. Jesus says this in Luke 9. Then he said to them all, if anyone wants to follow after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. For whosoever wants to save his life will lose it, will relinquish it. But whoever loses his life because of me will save it. For what does it benefit someone if he gains the whole world and yet loses or forfeits his soul? You know what Jesus is saying there? Even if you owned this entire planet, it was yours, it's still worth significantly less than your soul is. Whether you owned all the property, all the money, all the cars, and all the accolades, they're worth far less than your soul is. And yet, how quickly we trade our precious time that we will never get back in this life for things that are worthless. Whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. See, rest gives us the opportunity to come before God with all our concerns, our trouble, and say, God, without you, my toiling is in vain. God, without you, my decisions are in vain. Lord, without you, I am wasting time. See, we need to relinquish thought patterns, behaviors, patterns of sin. Do you know that living in sin and then hiding sin can make you super tired? You ever notice that? How easy to tell the first lie it is, but how exhausting it is to keep telling lies to cover that one up? Ever notice how freeing it is? How scary but freeing it is when you're actually caught or confessed? Isn't it mind-blowing how powerful confession is? And see, some of you need to relinquish that. You need to relinquish that lifestyle. And you say, Lord, I don't know what my life is going to look like, but it has to be better than this. Because what I'm doing is crushing my soul, is crushing me, and I need rest. Maybe it is hurts from your past. You know, bitterness can be exhausting too. That is a heavy, heavy, heavy weight to have to carry with you, man. Bitterness is like strapping on a backpack weighed down full of lead bricks and expecting you to walk up a mountain, because that's kind of what it feels like in life. You're walking up a mountain. No wonder you're feeling discouraged, disappointed, and crushed, because bitterness is bidding for your time and attention. And it's trying to enslave you. Bitterness will enslave you. Sin will enslave you. Selfish agendas will enslave you. But God gives you rest and freedom. Matter of fact, so much so. This is what Jesus says here. I want to conclude on this verse. Because Jesus was pulling all of these themes in, and he knows the story. He was there. He was there with Moses. He was there with the people. He instituted this principle of rest. And Jesus, then in Matthew 11, nearing the end of his ministry, and he knew what was going to happen, and he knew where he was going and what he was called to do and his purpose on this planet was. And he says this in Matthew 11:28, he says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Put rest in the comments. I will give you rest. Take up my yoke and learn from me. Take up my yoke and watch me. Walk with me and learn from me, because I am lowly and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. See, why could Jesus say this? Well, because he, Jesus, who knew perfect rest, who knew perfect community with the Father, came down to this restless, wrestling, hard planet, walked amongst restless, non-restful, busy human beings, and then he was hung on a cross. And so when you think that you need to trade it all for your busy schedules, because that's what it's going to take to maintain and achieve what you think you need to maintain and achieve, look at the cross and see him there, writhing and wrestling and trying to breathe. He knew no rest there on the cross, because his rest was being imparted onto you and onto you and onto you and onto me, so that we can stand and say, I don't got to live in that. I don't got to live in that pressure, man. I don't got to live in that. I can take a day, and say, Jesus, without you, this thing is going to crush me. And if this is what you called me to do, I'm going to stop it. God, If I'm tired, let it be tired doing your will. Let me be a faithful servant at the end of the race. I walk hand in hand, arm in arm, shoulder to shoulder with you, and to the next portion of my life, into eternity, knowing that I have done a good job, being able to hear, well done, faithful servant. That's the kind of tired I want to be. Not the kind of tired that says, God, today I just can't pick my head up and I can't do it anymore because it's crushing me. It's sucking the air out of my lungs. That isn't life. That's slavery. What does it look like to rest? So I want to conclude on some really, I hope, practical tips, but I do want to be honest. This is going to look different for each and every person because we do live in a crazy world. We don't live in the yesteryears that I think some people wish we did or think we did, where church on Sunday was always the thing. Listen, I'm not Sabbathing right now. I've been up early today getting ready for this morning. I've been up late last night trying to get ready for this morning. Saturday and Sundays are not my Sabbath day. So for me, Friday is my Sabbath day. Me and my wife both have Fridays off. She works on Saturdays. I partially work on Saturdays, getting ready for Sundays every single Saturday of my life unless I'm on vacation. So Friday is our Sabbath day. And so what that means for us is that we protect it. Like we ruthlessly protect our Friday. I never agree to do something, or she never agrees to do something unless we have talked about it and made sure that this is a sacrifice worth sacrificing in that season, because Fridays are special to us. That is my Sabbath. I don't do no pastor work. If you email me or call me on a Friday, you better be about to die, because it's my Sabbath, man. That's for me. It is because I'm a jerk. That's for me. I'm not a good leader or pastor or husband or father or friend if I don't have a day to come before the Lord and rest. So we Sabbath together. We do things that we enjoy together as a family. The biblical Sabbath model was families came together and celebrated, and in recognition of what God had done and what He was going to do, you just sit and let God be God and say, God, today I sit in the blessings that you have given me in my life. Today, I'm not in charge. God, you are. So we do things that bring us joy. Another practical tip, besides picking out a day, I would encourage you, if you can, it's going to take a discipline to set a day in your week. I don't know what day that is. Maybe it's a Tuesday. Maybe it's Monday. Maybe it's Sunday. I don't know. But what day is it that you can just be? You have the time. Don't waste it away doing pointless stuff like watching TV. Watching TV isn't resting. Resting is doing something that brings you joy and brings you closer to the Lord. Here's another practical tip. I had someone share this with me. So I work a lot with my mind. I do a lot of studying, a lot of reading, a lot of thinking and dealing with people a lot. And it can be very stressful on my end. So it's not a very physical job, but it's a very mind-intensive job. So this is the practical tip. If you work with your mind, Sabbath or rest with your hands. And so honestly, this may sound crazy, but on Fridays when we're not doing a whole lot, I actually love to work and piddle in my yard. I love to cut the grass and work around my house and just do small things that honestly don't mean that much. Like it's not a burden. It's actually a joy. I'm just living and resting in a place knowing that God is taking care of me. I'm not honey-do listing. I'm just being. I'm just doing things. Spending time with my family, with my kids. Maybe if you work with your hands, though, and you don't want to do that, if you work with your hands, Sabbath with your mind. So if you're a physical laborer and you're doing a lot of physically intensive stuff, man, maybe your Sabbath needs to include reading good books, doing things that you enjoy, going off and just going places and having fun. Maybe not in the pandemic right now because that's a weird thing, but finding something you enjoy, Sabbath with your mind. But ultimately, Sabbath points to this picture that one day, when God is going to make it all right, all the wrongs He's going to make right. And it isn't we're going to sit around playing a harp on a cloud. That is not heaven. I don't know what you've been told. That's not heaven. But the true final Sabbath will be where we will spend every moment under the presence and grace of God, finally being all that we were truly meant to be and doing what we were truly meant to do. So we get to practice that weekly. We get to practice eternity. You know that? Sabbathing is actually practicing for heaven. I think we're pretty bad at practicing this in our culture. So this is something that I have really been challenging myself with more. Because while I preach with a lot of energy, that doesn't mean that I always approach my Sabbath the same way, because it is very, very easy for your Sabbath day to be hijacked by all sorts of other seemingly important things. And sometimes you got to make a call that, Lord, today I have to get this done. I have to do this. I think the Lord has mercy on that. But if that happens more time than not, there's something going on. So I want to close this in prayer, and they're over today. I hope this brings a lot of value to you, because listen, if you don't rest, you will crash. That's not what God has intended for you in your life. Let's pray. King Jesus, thank you so much for this powerful principle, this beautiful story that we see, that you didn't give a bunch of rules, you give rest. Lord, that often the rest comes before the rules, and how powerful that a principle plays into our lives now, Lord, that you're not some demanding master. No, you're a loving Father who delights in nothing more than just being with us. So teach us how to be with you, Lord. Those that are really struggling to pray and spend time with you, Lord, help us all to have the capacity and the willpower to push through that, the ability to slow it down, to push it out of our minds for just a little while, Lord. That stuff will always be there. There's nothing more important than we can be doing with our time than spending it seeking you. We're praying for those that are struggling with work-life balance today, whether they're in this building, watching online, listening to this at a later date. Lord, I pray that you will give them the wisdom, the courage, the boldness to make the decisions in their life to balance that out, Lord, that you did not create us to toil for no reason, Lord. Help us to look to you for our rest. Help us to relinquish the parts of our life that we struggle to give up. Help us to recalibrate the parts of our mind and our hearts that need to be recalibrated so that we can be all that you have called us to be and do. In Jesus' precious, precious name that we pray. Amen. Thank you, guys. Love y'all. See you next week.